Since 1986, the Metroid series has gone from 2D to 3D to consoles and portables, with plenty of Samus appearances and cameos in other games along the way. It's responsible for co-creating the Metroidvania genre, leading to games like Hollow Knight and Ori and the Blind Forest, plus dozens more. And hey, it's even dabbled in pinball and soccer. And with Metroid Prime 4 Beyond on the way, it's the perfect time to look back on this incredible game franchise. Here are the top 10 Metroid games of all time. These days, one of the most basic functions expected of a Metroidvania game is a map screen that slowly reveals itself as the player explores its maze-like network of corridors and hidden rooms. But back in 1991, when Metroid 2: Return of Samus arrived on the Nintendo Game Boy, that wasn't exactly standard practice yet. That makes Metroid 2 feel a bit on the obtuse side, especially since its main focus is sending Samus to SR388 on a planet-wide quest to hunt down every last Metroid left, with no real way to track their locations in-game. But players who persevered and played along with their own hand-drawn maps, or one tucked inside an issue of Nintendo Power, were rewarded with a pocket-sized Metroid game complete with all of Samus's signature moves and weapons from the NES game, even if the benefits of portability also meant playing the game on a fuzzy little puke green Game Boy screen, which I did. Still, from its big character sprites, tense chiptune music, and lonely claustrophobic setting, there's something really special about Metroid 2, and for people wishing Metroid 2 had a few more modern features, 2017's excellent 3DS remake from Mercury Steam totally delivers on that front. But hey, we'll talk about that one more in just a bit, so stick around. Inspired by the 1979 sci-fi film Alien, as well as previous Nintendo hits like Super Mario Bros. And The Legend of Zelda, the original Metroid game was unlike anything at the time. Sure, there'd been tons of space shooters and platforming games released by the time Metroid came out in 1986, but none of them had ever brought so many elements of those genres together in the same place, complete with a huge map with horizontally and vertically scrolling screens. What made Metroid especially unique at the time was the way its protagonist Samus controlled and explored through unique power-ups, like the ability to turn into a ball and explore hidden tunnels, or the screw attack jump that allowed players to rapidly flip up walls and corridors, tearing through ugly space monsters along the way. It also established grotesque creature villains like Kraid, Ridley, and Mother Brain, which continued to show up in Metroid games for decades to come. And it concluded with one of the most clever NES game ending sequences ever, a frantic escape from a ticking time bomb after defeating the game's main boss. And perhaps one of the coolest surprises were its multiple endings, several of which revealed the player to be a bounty hunter named Samus Aran, who was a woman the entire time, a concept that was pretty uncommon for video games in the mid-80s. So much of what makes modern Metroid games so incredible can be traced right back to the revolutionary original NES game, and the same can be said for the entire Metroidvania genre as a whole. Metroid Samus Returns took all the promise of the original Game Boy Metroid that we just talked about and completely rebuilt it from the ground up and presented it in full color, glasses-free 3D, complete with totally overhauled graphics, newly remade music, and a much improved combat system that gave Samus an uppercut-style melee mechanic to knock back enemies in between bursts of arm cannon blasts and morph ball bombs. It was really cool. I really liked it. I'm actually just waiting for the teleprompter to... There we go. It's still ultimately a remake of a fairly one-note Metroid game, but finally having a map, which is viewable at all times thanks to the 3DS's second screen, and snappy, fluid player movement and offensive options against adversaries makes Samus Returns feel distinctly like its own thing. After Team Ninja's wobbly and unsatisfying Metroid Other M in 2010, players were justified in worrying that another outside developer handling the Metroid franchise wouldn't exactly lead to the best results, but Mercury Steam proved they have what it takes to make a very good Metroid game and eventually go on to make a great one. While nowhere near as revolutionary as its predecessor, Metroid Prime 2 is a rock-solid sequel that introduces a really cool parallel light and dark dimension mechanic, a classic Nintendo gameplay trope established in The Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past Light and Dark worlds that allows players to explore alternate versions of the same levels to hunt for power-ups and suit upgrades that help you better survive in each world. With that concept, Prime 2 also introduced Dark Samus, a character that sounds exactly like what you'd expect, a dark evil version of Samus, which unsurprisingly turned out to be really cool. So cool in fact that Dark Samus went on to become an assist trophy and eventually a fully playable character in the Smash Bros. Game series. Prime 2 also introduced a pretty bare-bones Metroid multiplayer mode that felt like a response to the success of games like Halo at the time, and while 4 different colored versions of Samus strafing in circles shooting at each other might not seem like the most interesting thing to do in a Metroid game, it was somehow entertaining enough to work in short bursts between trying to 100% the main campaign. I liked it. After an 8-year hiatus from Metroid games, the series skipped over the entire Nintendo 64 generation after all. The year 2002 brought us 2 new entries in the series across the GameCube and the Game Boy Advance, the latter of which was a classic 2D side-scrolling Metroid game with gorgeous pixel art and an endlessly replayable campaign. Metroid Fusion built on all of the excellent gameplay established in the SNES classic Super Metroid, and although it didn't quite hit the same highs, it's still a very awesome game on its own, held back only by its slightly more linear exploration and overly talking commanding officer Adam Malkovich. Still, Metroid Fusion immediately stood on its own as a tight, briskly paced Metroid game that instantly became a huge hit with the speedrunning community thanks largely to its multiple ending unlocks that appear depending on completion time and percentage finished. Samus came back in a big way in 2002 and reminded people that Metroid was here to stay as one of the best video game franchises ever created. By 2007, the Metroid series had gone 2D, 3D, had touchscreen controls, had become a rumble pack-infused pinball game, so obviously the natural next step was a Nintendo Wii motion and pointer-controlled game, as was tradition at the time. Luckily, Metroid Prime 3 largely avoided many of the frustrations and pratfalls that several other franchise sequels stumbled on during the awkward waggle era of gaming that we've largely moved on from as a species, and while some of the motion control implementation in Prime 3 felt a little finicky at times, pointing a Wii remote at the screen to blast away at enemies was immensely satisfying. Better than that, Prime 3 also capped off the excellent Prime trilogy with a more beautiful and breathtaking world that added more verticality and cool new traversal methods along with Hyper Mode, which gave Samus the option to go full-on attack frenzy at the expense of her health. Metroid Prime 3 was a fantastic send-off for the Prime franchise at the time, when none of us had any idea it wouldn't get a sequel for 18 years, unless of course you count the 3DS game Metroid Prime Federation Force, which we definitely won't. Even if it did tease Metroid Prime 4 in its secret ending. True story. The second Metroid game on the Game Boy Advance is also a remake of the first Metroid game ever released, with a stunning new 16-bit pixel art overhaul, taking notes from Super Metroid and Metroid Fusion to improve the original NES game in just about every conceivable way. Every boss fight felt bigger and better, the improved soundtrack rocked, and hey, there's even an actual map now! And if you ever get nostalgic for the original game, it's unlockable here too. On top of that, multiple difficulty options made their way to Zero Mission, along with new cutscenes, a time attack mode, and a gallery of images that players can uncover by performing specific criteria. While the original NES game was revolutionary at the time and still has its charm today, Zero Mission is truly the best way to experience the game that started it all for the Metroid series. While their remake Samus Returns for the 3DS was Mercury Steam's first efforts at a Metroid game, Metroid Dread was a totally original adventure that added a whole new twist, creating one of the most tense and exhilarating Metroid experiences to date. Constantly being hunted by Emmy, the fast, hulking, and intelligent killer robots ready to end Samus's mission in seconds, meant that the typical explore-at-your-own-pace gameplay of the traditional Metroid mission was frequently interrupted with tense and dangerous urgency. Mercury Steam also took the melee combat and parrying system from Samus Returns and improved it, making close quarters fights feel better than ever, which, with these snappier controls and increased player speed, allow Metroid Dread to go pound for pound with the best modern Metroidvanias. Dread is also the toughest game in the series since the original NES Metroid, but manages to never feel cheap or padded thanks to its brilliant map design and liberal checkpoint system. In an ideal world, Mercury Steam is giving us a new 2D Metroid every few years, while Retro continues to make 3D Prime games, giving us the best of both worlds for this legendary series forever. At least, that's what I want. On the Nintendo 64, Super Mario 64, The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, and Donkey Kong 64 all proved that once 2D Nintendo franchises could successfully make the jump to 3D, but unfortunately this era didn't involve a brand new 3D Metroid game at all, and that sucked. But in 2002, Retro Studios did the unthinkable. They successfully transformed the classic feel of Super Metroid into a stunning, atmospheric, and revolutionary first-person action platforming game with fantastic shooting mechanics and an incredible world to explore. From seeing small drops of condensation build around Samus's visor, to the first time they stepped into the icy Phendrana drifts as the camera panned out and the piano music swelled, they knew they were experiencing something magical. Everything from morph ball exploration to suit upgrades and an ever-evolving arsenal of weaponry and traversal tools made their way into players' hands in Metroid Prime after the franchise had been largely dormant for 8 years. Boss fights and explosive set pieces brought the series to epic new heights, setting the stage for future Metroid Prime games for years to come. At the time, standard first-person shooters were a dime a dozen, but there was really nothing like Metroid Prime. Not only that, but 20 years later, Prime still holds up well, as proven by the Nintendo Switch release of Metroid Prime Remastered. And finally, almost 3 decades later, and after a wide variety of experimentation across various genres, perspectives, and control methods, Super Metroid still remains the greatest Metroid game of all time. In fact, Super Metroid set the bar so high that the team behind it couldn't figure out how to top it during the entire N64 era, so the Metroid series just took that generation off, like a victory lap. Super Metroid still feels amazing and is still enjoyed by new players and hardcore speedrunning obsessives alike. But why? Well, it's perfectly paced, has some of the most rewarding exploration in the entire series, meticulously crafted level design, pulse-pounding music, and some of the best-looking pixel art of all time. Like several of its most successful Super Nintendo contemporaries, it took everything that worked in the previous NES games and improved it, making it one of the greatest and most iconic side-scrolling action games ever made. Super Metroid helped define both the future of the series and the genre as a whole. It's a masterclass in game design and one that both indie and AAA game developers have been citing as an inspiration for nearly 30 years now. It's not only the best Metroid game, it's one of the best video games ever made, period. And there you have it, the top 10 Metroid games leading up to the launch of the highly anticipated Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. Once that game releases, it will join a lineup of 15 games with Metroid in the title, all of which I made sure to give a nod to in this video, even if only 10 of them made the list. So, what's your favorite Metroid game ever made? Which game do you wish made the list or got bumped even higher or lower? Are you a diehard defender of Metroid Other M or Federation Force? Did you play hundreds of hours of Metroid Prime First Hunt demo when the Nintendo DS launched like I did? Morph Ball Bomb into the comments below and tell me all about it. Oh, and if you want even more Metroid love from IGN, check out our latest Metroid Prime Trilogy retrospective episode of Nintendo Voice Chat, our weekly Nintendo podcast. For all things Metroid, stick to the wall, I guess, as a ball, with IGN.